The day I opened the letter, the house was very quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing, and every small sound feels heavy. I remember standing by the kitchen window, holding that envelope in my hands. It was thin, no return address, just my name written in a familiar handwriting that I had not seen in many years. For a moment, I did not open it. I already felt something breaking inside me, even before I read a single word. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself it was probably nothing serious. Maybe a late apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe, finally, a bridge back home. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the small table by the window, the same table where I used to sit with my family long ago. When I opened the letter, my hands were shaking, but my face stayed still. I read the first line, then the second. And by the time I reached the middle of the page, my heart felt like it had dropped into a deep, quiet place where no one could hear it cry. The letter did not shout. It did not accuse. It did not explain much. It simply told the truth. And that truth was this: my family did not forget me by accident. They chose to forget me, slowly, quietly, on purpose. I folded the letter carefully. I placed it back inside the envelope, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to understand how love can fade without a single goodbye. That letter did not break my heart loudly. It broke it gently, the way something precious slips out of your hands without you noticing, until it is already gone. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old. I am a mother of 2, and I used to be a sister, a daughter, an aunt, and someone who mattered at a family table. I live alone now in a small house at the edge of town. It is not a sad house. It is clean. It is warm. But it is quiet in a way that feels unfinished. Every morning I wake up early, I open the curtains, I let the light in, and I make breakfast for one. There was a time when mornings were loud. There was laughter, footsteps, someone asking where their shoes were, someone else complaining about the coffee. Back then, I thought that noise would last forever. I was wrong. I was married once. My husband, Robert, was a gentleman with tired eyes and a soft voice. We were not perfect, but we tried. We raised our children in a modest home full of rules, love, and simple routines. Our son, Daniel, was the quiet one, always watching, always thinking. Our daughter, Elise, was the loud one. She spoke her feelings before she understood them. I loved them both in different ways, but with the same full heart. Family mattered to me. It always did. I grew up believing that family was something you held on to, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. My parents taught me that silence was better than conflict, that forgiveness did not need an apology, that staying together mattered more than being right. So I carried that lesson into my own life. I stayed quiet when I felt ignored. I smiled when something hurt. I waited when I should have spoken. And slowly, without noticing, I began to disappear from my own family story. At first, it was small things: a missed phone call that was never returned, a holiday invitation that came very late, a birthday card that stopped arriving. I told myself not to overthink it. People get busy, life changes, children grow up. That is what mothers tell themselves when they do not want to feel unwanted. When Daniel married his wife Laura, I tried very hard to fit in. She was polite but distant. Her smiles never reached her eyes. I helped when I was asked. I stayed quiet when I felt uncomfortable. I did not want to be that mother-in-law. When Elise moved away, she promised to call every week. At first, she did. Then once a month. Then only on holidays. I never complained. I never asked why. I thought love meant patience. Years passed like that, quietly, softly. Then, one day, I realized something that scared me. No one was calling anymore, not even to argue, not even to check in. Silence had replaced connection. I tried to reach out. I sent messages. I made phone calls. Most went unanswered. When I did hear back, the replies were short, polite, careful, as if I were someone they used to know. Still, I held on to hope. I believed there must be a reason, a misunderstanding, something unspoken that could still be fixed. And then, after years of quiet distance, the letter arrived. The envelope felt heavier than it looked. The handwriting belonged to my sister, Helen. We had grown up side by side, shared clothes, shared secrets, shared grief when our parents passed. She was the last person I expected to explain my absence. The letter did not mention love. It did not mention forgiveness. It spoke of what was best for everyone, of keeping peace, of letting the past stay where it is. It said my absence made things easier, calmer, less complicated. Reading those words, I finally understood. They did not hate me. They did not fight with me. They simply chose a life that worked better without me in it, and that hurt more than anger ever could. I sat alone that evening, the letter folded beside me, the sun setting outside the window. I thought about all the moments I stayed silent to protect others, all the times I believed being patient meant being loved. I wondered when I stopped being included in decisions about my own family. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. Was my quiet strength actually teaching them that I did not matter? That night, I did not cry. I did not feel angry. I felt something deeper, a slow, painful realization that love, when never spoken, can slowly disappear. And this was only the beginning of the truth. At first, nothing felt wrong. That is the strange part. Life did not fall apart suddenly. No one yelled. No one slammed doors. There were no harsh words or final arguments. Instead, things changed quietly. So quietly that I didn't notice until I was already standing outside my own family. It began with small moments, moments that felt harmless on their own. A phone call that went unanswered, a message that received a short reply hours later, plans that were already made before I heard about them. I told myself it was normal. People get busy, children grow older, lives move in different directions. That is what mothers say when they do not want to feel hurt. I remember the first time I truly felt it, though I didn't name it then. Daniel had promised to call me one evening. He said, "I'll call you after dinner, Mom." I waited. I sat in my living room with the lamp on and the television off. I didn't want noise. I wanted to hear the phone ring. It never did. The next day he sent a message. "Sorry, Mom, busy night." I replied, "That's okay," and I meant it. But something inside me folded in on itself just a little. When Daniel married Laura, I tried very hard to do everything right. I told myself I would not interfere. I would not give advice unless asked. I wanted to be welcome. Laura was polite. She smiled. She thanked me when I helped. But there was always a careful distance, like a line neither of us mentioned. When they moved into their new home, I waited to be invited. I did not want to show up unannounced. Weeks passed. "Would you like me to see the house sometime?" "Oh, sure," he said. "Maybe soon." Soon turned into months. When I finally visited, everything felt tidy and controlled, like I was a guest, not family. I stayed only a short while. I did not want to overstay. I told myself I was being respectful, but deep inside, I felt something else. I felt unnecessary. When my first grandchild was born, I expected a call. Not because I needed attention, but because I wanted to share that moment. The call didn't come. I found out through a message hours later. "He arrived this morning," Daniel wrote. No photo, no details. I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. "He's beautiful," I wrote, even though I hadn't seen him yet. When I finally held my grandchild weeks later, I felt joy, but I also felt something sharp and quiet. I was holding someone who already had a life I wasn't part of. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I rocked him gently. Silence became my habit. I believed silence showed trust. Elise's distance felt different, but it hurt just as much. She moved away for work, and at first we stayed close. She called often. We talked about her days, her worries, her plans. Then life pulled her in new directions. New friends, new routines. Our calls became shorter. Sometimes she sounded distracted. I would hear typing in the background. Once, she said, "Mom, can I call you back?" She didn't. I didn't mention it later. I didn't want to seem demanding. I told myself I should be proud of her independence. But pride does not erase loneliness. It sits beside it. Slowly, I became the one who always reached out. And then I stopped. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't want to feel rejected again. Holidays changed too. Invitations came later, if at all. Sometimes I was included. Sometimes I wasn't. When I asked, the answers were gentle. "We thought you might be busy. We didn't want to bother you." I nodded. I smiled. I said, "It's okay." And with every "it's okay," I felt myself slipping further away. Helen, my sister, noticed before I did. She would mention gatherings casually. "Oh, Daniel and Laura hosted dinner last weekend." I would pause. "Oh," I said, "that's nice." She never explained why I wasn't there, and I never asked, because asking felt like begging. One afternoon, I finally did. "Did I miss something?" I asked her quietly. She hesitated. "No," she said. "Things are just different now. Different." That word stayed with me. I started paying attention then. I noticed how decisions were made without me, how plans were shared after they were settled. I noticed how careful everyone sounded when they spoke to me, like they were afraid of upsetting me, but no one asked how I felt. I began to feel like an old piece of furniture, still there, still useful, but no longer central. The hardest part was not the distance. It was the confusion. I didn't know what I had done wrong, so I searched myself. Maybe I talked too much when I did speak. Maybe I wasn't warm enough. Maybe I was too quiet. I replayed conversations in my head at night. Every pause felt like a mistake. Still, I said nothing. I believed speaking would only make things worse. Then came my birthday. I didn't plan anything. I didn't expect gifts. I expected acknowledgement. The day passed quietly. No calls, no messages. In the evening, I baked myself a small cake. I lit one candle. I sat alone at the table. That was the moment I finally admitted the truth to myself. I was not just lonely. I was forgotten. Not erased, just overlooked. I didn't cry. I felt numb. Later that night, Helen called. "Oh, Margaret," she said, "I almost forgot. Happy birthday." I thanked her. After we hung up, I sat there in silence. I understood something then. Being forgotten hurts more than being rejected. Rejection has an explanation. Forgetting does not. After that day, I stopped hoping for things to change on their own. I stopped waiting, but I also stopped reaching out. And that silence became the space where the letter would later land. The distance had already grown. The letter simply named it. I did not open the letter again for several days. I already knew what it said, but my heart was not ready to feel it twice. Instead, I went on with my daily routine. I cleaned the house, I watered the plants, I went to the market and spoke politely to strangers. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something had shifted. The letter had opened a door in my mind that I had kept closed for years, and once it was open, memories began to walk through it freely. I started remembering moments I had pushed away, small moments, quiet moments, like the time Daniel asked me not to come over without calling first. He said it kindly, he said it gently, but the message was clear. We like to keep things simple. When I offered to host a family dinner, I smiled, I nodded, I stepped back, again. I remembered how often I had been careful not to cross lines that were never clearly drawn, how often I had chosen silence instead of honesty. Then, one afternoon, something happened that forced me to face the truth fully. Helen called. Her voice sounded different this time. Not distant, not rushed. Heavy. "Margaret," she said, "have you read the letter?" "Yes," I answered. There was a pause. "I didn't know how else to explain it," she said quietly. I took a deep breath. "Explain what?" I asked. She sighed. "The way things are," she said. "The way they've been for a long time." I did not interrupt her. "I think," she continued, "everyone just moved on." The words were soft, but they landed hard. "Moved on from what?" I asked. There was another pause. "From the tension," she said. "From the heaviness." I closed my eyes. "What tension?" I asked. "I never argued. I never demanded anything." "I know," she said quickly. "That's the thing." I waited. "It was always quiet with you," she said. "No one ever knew what you were thinking or feeling." I felt a slow ache in my chest. "I thought being quiet was respectful," I said. "It can be," she replied, "but sometimes it feels like distance." That was when it happened. That was the moment everything became clear. My silence, which I believed was kindness, had been mistaken for absence. My patience had been read as indifference. My willingness to step back had made it easier for others to step away. They did not forget me suddenly. They faded me out slowly, not because they didn't care, but because I made it easy. I sat there holding the phone, listening to Helen breathe on the other end. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked softly. "No," she said, "but you didn't do anything either." Those words stayed with me. After the call ended, I sat alone in the living room. The light outside was fading. The house felt larger than usual. I thought about all the times I chose peace over presence. All the times I believed love meant never being a burden. They'll come back when they're ready, but they never had to. Life moved forward without me, not out of cruelty, out of convenience. That realization hurt more than blame ever could. A few days later, Daniel finally called. I hadn't heard his voice in months. "Mom," he said carefully. "Hi," I replied. He cleared his throat. "Aunt Helen told me you got the letter." "Yes," I said. Another pause. "I didn't know how to say things," he admitted. "I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed at that. "You didn't," I said honestly. "You just disappeared." He was quiet for a moment. "We thought you were okay," he said. "You never said anything." That sentence broke something open inside me. "I wasn't okay," I said gently. "I was trying not to cause trouble." He sighed. "I guess we thought you preferred it that way. Preferred being alone, preferred being forgotten." I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply said, "I missed you." His voice softened. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." It was the first apology I had heard in years. It didn't fix everything, but it mattered. After that call, I finally read the letter again. This time, I saw it differently. It wasn't written to hurt me. It was written to explain something everyone else already accepted. My absence had become normal. We assumed you needed space. We didn't want to impose. We thought this was easier for you. Easier. I realized then that my family didn't see my silence as strength. They saw it as permission. Permission to move on without checking in. Permission to stop including me. Permission to forget. That night, I slept very little. I wasn't angry. I was grieving. Not just the loss of connection, but the loss of my voice. I had spent so many years trying to be understanding that I never allowed myself to be seen. I had confused selflessness with invisibility. It was understanding my role in the distance, not blaming myself, but finally seeing the truth. Love needs expression, and silence, no matter how gentle, can feel like absence to others. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter of my own. Not to accuse, not to demand, but to speak. I wrote about missing birthdays, about quiet holidays, about waiting for calls that never came. I wrote about choosing silence because I believed it was love. And I wrote one simple truth: I wanted to belong. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully. For the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, not forgiveness yet, but honesty. And that was enough to begin. I did not send my letter right away. After I wrote it, I placed it on the kitchen table and walked away. I needed time to sit with my own words. I needed to be sure they came from truth, not pain. For years, I had avoided honesty because I feared it would push people away. Now I understood something different. Silence had already done that. The next morning, I read the letter again. It was simple. There were no accusations, just feelings that had waited too long to be spoken. I mailed it that afternoon. Not to everyone, just to Daniel and Elise. I did not expect replies. I told myself that sending it was enough. For the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. Not happy, but honest. Days passed. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. I filled my time with small things: morning walks, journaling, cooking meals I liked, even if I was the only one eating them. Then one evening the phone rang. It was Elise. I hadn't seen her name on my screen in months. "Mom," she said softly. I could hear something in her voice. Not guilt, not fear, understanding. "I got your letter," she said. I waited. "I didn't know you felt so alone," she continued. "I thought you were strong, independent." I smiled sadly. "I am," I said. "But I still wanted you." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked." That apology reached a place in me I didn't know was still hurting. We talked for a long time that night, not about blame, not about the past in detail, just about feelings. She told me she had assumed I didn't need her, that I had my own life. I told her that needing someone doesn't mean weakness. We cried a little, not loudly, just softly. A few days later, Daniel called again. He sounded different now, more open. "I read your letter," he said. I could hear paper moving on his end. "I didn't realize how much we stopped including you," he admitted. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." "I know," I said. Laura joined the call later. Her voice was careful but sincere. "I never wanted you to feel unwanted," she said. I believed her. She explained that she had been afraid of overstepping, afraid of doing something wrong. I realized then that fear had lived on both sides, fear of being too much. Fear of not being enough. We talked about boundaries, about expectations, about how silence can mean different things to different people. Nothing was magically fixed, but something important had changed. We were speaking. A week later, Daniel invited me over for dinner. It was a simple invitation. "Just us," he said. "No pressure." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone long after the call ended. I felt nervous, not because I was afraid of rejection, but because I was afraid of hope. When I arrived at their house, Laura opened the door. She smiled, a real smile this time. "Come in," she said. The house smelled like food and warmth. I sat at the table where my grandchildren played quietly. No one rushed me. No one avoided my eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. During dinner, Daniel asked my opinion about something small, a home repair. It felt strange and wonderful. I realized how much I had missed being asked, being needed. After that night, things did not suddenly return to how they once were. They became something new, something slower, more careful, but more honest. Elise began calling once a week, sometimes more, not out of duty, out of choice. Helen called too. She apologized for the letter. I thought honesty would be kinder, she said. It was, I replied. It just hurt. We talked about the past, about how we both avoided conflict. We agreed to stop pretending silence was peace. I also made changes. I stopped waiting quietly. When I missed someone, I said it. When I felt left out, I spoke gently. Not with anger, with clarity. It was uncomfortable at first. Old habits do not disappear easily. But I learned something important. Speaking does not mean demanding. It means allowing others to truly see you. Some people responded with warmth. Others still kept their distance. I accepted that too. Not every relationship can be repaired, but some can be reshaped. I no longer blamed myself for the years of silence. I understood why I chose it. I was trying to protect everyone. Now I was learning to include myself. The letter that once broke my heart had done something unexpected. It gave me permission to speak, to take up space, to be present in my own life again. And that was healing. It has been some time now since the letter arrived. I keep it in the same drawer, folded neatly, no longer hidden, not because it hurts less, but because it no longer frightens me. Life did not turn perfect after that. Families rarely do. There are still quiet days. There are still moments when I wonder if I should have spoken sooner, but I no longer live in that heavy silence. I have learned something important about love. Love does not only live in patience, it also lives in presence. For many years, I believed that being easy to live without was a kind of strength. I believed that staying quiet meant staying kind. Now I understand something different. When you make yourself invisible, people eventually stop looking for you. Not because they don't care, but because they think you are already gone. The letter showed me that my family did not forget me in anger. They forgot me in comfort. And that truth hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped waiting to be invited into my own life. I stopped measuring my worth by how little space I took. I began to speak in small ways. I miss you. I would like to come. That hurt me. Simple sentences, honest ones. And something gentle happened. Not everyone came closer, but I came back to myself. I learned that peace without truth is not peace at all. It is just quiet loneliness. Now, when I sit at my kitchen table, the house still feels quiet, but it no longer feels empty. Sometimes there is laughter here. Sometimes there are long phone calls. Sometimes there is only me, and that is okay too. I have learned to forgive, not because the past disappeared, but because holding it no longer serves me. The letter that once broke my heart became a mirror. It showed me how deeply I loved, and how often I forgot to let myself be loved back. If there is one thing I would tell anyone listening to this story, it is this: do not confuse silence with strength. Do not disappear to keep peace. Do not wait quietly to be chosen. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And the people who love you need to hear you, not guess you. I still keep the letter, not as a wound, but as a reminder that I deserve to be seen, that love should not require vanishing, and that sometimes the hardest truth is the one that finally brings us home.